And so I asked Mackenzie for a pre-release version and...
Scotty, we're on air.
Welcome back to the finals, the world's greatest game show. And this time, we're virtually all in Las Vegas. There's no greater place to risk it all, or destroy a building or two, than under the glow of the neon lights.
And with risks and damages in the air, we're happy to have insurance company Holto as a proud sponsor. Holto, digitally insured, virtually secured.
But even Holto can't protect our contestants from some tricky surprises this season, including our new gadget, the Vanishing Bomb.
Okay, it's time to give our fans what they want. Let's get started.
I first heard of this game at one of the reveals at the Game Awards a few years ago, and also had the game recommended by a friend at the time when the game launched in early December. However, I never played either beta versions, and have no idea what the game was like during those times. What I do know is that this Twitch TV guy must be really MLG. The Finals is a heavily team-based, competitive FPS set in a virtual game show. Everything is over-the-top hyper-capitalist, from the fact that players explode into coins, to the in-universe advertising, to the egregious promotions that the hosts keep pushing. Honestly, I'm not into all of it. I don't care about any of the in-universe lore or sponsors, though it would be really funny if this game could pull off real-life sponsors and advertisement. Like, imagine if you could look around and see like a 5-gum ad, or a Logitech AK. Speaking of the hosts, apparently all the hosts' voices are literally voiced by AI. This caused some controversy among the voice acting community, especially when Embark decided to double down on its use. I don't have a lot of input on this, other than obviously this is a really bad stain on Embark, especially when we're coming out of an actor strike so soon. However, I would like to hear a wider range of hosts. Being able to hear a diverse range of accents and even languages would contribute a lot to the game show dynamic. You ever watch Speed Racer and in the final scene there's a pan of all the casters going ballistic in their own languages? You know, like that German guy yelling, "Hansperaken!" or the Asian guy just screaming? I'd love to pull off a team wipe and just suddenly hear, "Da grani champion do pixolito, Sebolba!" Upon launching the game, you have to sign up for a third-party account, though signing in through Steam is supported. I don't really love the fact that I'm trusting a new company I haven't heard of with any sort of my information, but considering the fact that there's already a cheating problem, I don't know if there's any sort of reasonable solution to this. The whole game works heavily on team play, and players can choose between 3 different builds that each have specific access to unlock and equip weapons, abilities, and utility. For some reason, you can create up to 6 contestants in total, with any combination of build type. Unfortunately, it seems the only reasonable use case for this is to save cosmetic outfits, because even if you do create 2 of every build to have a broad choice of loadout options, you can't change builds once you actually spawn into the game. This is especially true in tournament-style matches, a game mode where you play up to 3 games, 2 knockout games where you play against 3 other teams, and a versus against 1 other team. It is very important that your build choice and loadout options are optimal to your team dynamic and your personal playstyle, because once you spawn into the first game of a tournament, you are locked to that build for the rest of the tournament, however long that takes. Before playing the game, I knew of complaints that there were balancing issues. The second I realized there was a goddamn Reinhardt shield available to a tank-oriented class, that, by the way, has no limits to how many of said class can be on a team, I had flashbacks of Overwatch and its GOATS meta. True to my suspicions, the most played team lineup seems to be MMH, or HHM, where the focus seems to be on the heavy class, bringing the most utility, while the medium brings healing or support. Though the light class exists to new players, it is definitively the worst option available to players at the start. Let's consider what we have as a new player. Heavies have some of the best destruction capability off the start, with Charge and Slam turning them into the Juggernaut bitch, and an RPG they keep up their ass. They also have the option of trading the ranged M60 LMG for the Sledgehammer, a melee weapon with destruction capability. Already the loadout is very damage focused, the M60 being a decent ranged weapon with a very deep bullet count and dependable DPS. But the pocket rocket is also available at the start and does 140 base damage. This is actually the nerf damage amount that was released during the time I was writing this script. The original base damage was 150. Exactly the same amount of health that a light build had. It's important to note this because this makes the heavy the only class that basically has 2 primary weapons. They also have access to the barricades, a set of medium height cover that can be useful in certain scenarios. Mediums get the AKM and the revolver, both solid weapons that can kill in about the same time. The jump pad, which is useful for vertical movement, and the defibs, a must-have for any medium loadout, allowing you to instantly revive teammates. It's not your fault if they don't pay attention though. Their default special is the medigun, the mercy beam, the healing beam, which does exactly what it says on the tin. The light class, however, gets the short end of the stick. Their starting weapons are the MAC-11 and SR-84 rifle. You'll notice that this is the only sniper in the game, and you'd be forgiven if you thought you could try quickscoping in the finals. It isn't, however, the high-risk, high-reward option to choose as the light class. In fact, almost none of the unlockable weapons or utility turn the light class into the high-risk, high-reward playstyle it ought to be. For one, the sniper is one of the worst weapons considering its time to kill on a completely healthy target. Sure, hitting headshots is clearly the best way to deal damage, but it can only one-shot other lights this way, which clearly isn't the weapon's intended targets. Its value really only lies with teams that communicate well with each other, with the light being able to provide intel on a wide range of the arena, which is a lot of space in this game. Otherwise, the MAC-11 is really the only other option for a light player. For utility, a new light player has the options of the flashbang, smoke, pyro, or goo grenades, or the breaching charge. Their default specialization is a worse zipline. That's all that new light builds get, and it makes light builds such a confusing class to learn. Like, what are they supposed to be, DPS? The heavy does that all on their own. Support? What the heavy can't do, the medium fills the gaps. Glass cannon? Good luck. Movement? The medium gets a jump pad and unlocks a zipline gun, putting the grappling hook to shame, and can even keep up with lights at full sprint. Really, the only thing that a light build can hope for is getting important picks like a tank heavy or a light sniper, and quickly getting away. There's only really a few ways that lights can do this, and the default loadout does not help this playstyle, making light objectively the worst build to play as a new player. And going forward from this point isn't great either. The light class requires the most amount of investment in order to see competitive results, requiring the player to unlock a different specialization, a different primary weapon, and a set of high-tier items like the stun gun and glitch grenades. Which brings me to one big problem the game has, a progression grind that is too slow and rewards too little. Going back to the light build, let's say you wanted to try different things. Of all the weapons that lights have as unlockables, there are essentially only two that work really well for the meta hit and run strategy. Those weapons are the sawed-off and the sword. A recent update during the time of writing this script has changed my opinions on the light meta weapons. Originally, I wanted to say that the sawed-off is the best weapon for hit and run tactics, being able to one-shot lights and two-shot anything else. Now, the sawed-off can only deal 300 damage maximum, and you have to use 2 quick melee strikes to finish off a heavy at full health. I believe that this nerf was not only unnecessary, but also the wrong direction to take. This nerf changes the optimal target from either a turtling heavy or healing medium to specifically healers. It could be argued that this promotes more team play by forcing the team to deal chip damage to the heavy before the light goes for the kill. But then this just promotes more turtling from the heavy with a mesh shield. If they really wanted to nerf the sawed-off so badly, they should have just simply redesigned the spread pattern to promote point-blank shots and deal a minimum of 310 damage. This way, at the very least, you'd have to throw in an elbow in order to finish off a heavy, and it makes the weapon slightly more difficult to use. If you're into melee weapons, the sword should be your primary option. It has solid base damage with quick attacks and an alt-fire lunge attack that can be used as slight speed boosts on the ground. Utilizing both primary and alt-fire attacks and topping off with quick melee strikes create combos that make quick work of medium and even heavy builds. The dagger is another hit and run weapon that should be considered. I've had decent experience with the dagger, but it takes a bit to learn how to use it effectively. For one, it does slightly less damage with the primary fire than the sword, and the alt fire is a stab that normally does the same amount as the primary fire, with a longer windup and ending lag. The saving grace here is that the alt fire backstabs deal bonus damage, enough to one-shot mediums, and it can bring heavies down to elbow smash range. Though butter knifing is not recommended, it can finish off targets that you can't seem to get behind, provided that they are weak enough to justify the low DPS. Throwing knives are by far the worst weapon you could invest in. I knew it would be going into it, but I couldn't know how bad until I used them in an actual game. You could go into the shooting range and try any weapon or utility you want, But the dummies can't replicate real player movements. Throwing knives are projectile weapons, so you have to account for travel time as well as your target's movements in order to perform with this weapon. Not only that, but throwing knives have the same, if not longer, time to kill than the default unpatched Mach 11, aiming for the body, making this not only a bad weapon on paper, but in practice as well. This weapon just doesn't work, which is a shame because otherwise, this would be one of the most fun weapons to use in this game. Everything I've heard about this game revolves around the notion that the finals prioritizes fun above anything else. And honestly, the finals is a fun shooter. The base gunplay is great, and the multiverses team matches is genius, considering you can only have a max party of 3 players, basically ensuring that no one side can completely snowball a match. But the progression grind isn't fun. Playing quick matches, the first time of games you're allowed to queue for as a new player, you gain an average of 100 VRs, currency you use to unlock gear. There's also a premium currency, as every live service game does, as well as a battle pass and a cosmetics store. But let's forget about that stuff for a minute. It costs 800 VRs in order to unlock a new weapon or low-tier utility item for any class, and 1000 VRs in order to unlock high-tier items like Heavy's Dome Shield, Medium Zipline Launcher, and Light Stun Gun and Vanish Bombs. This means that you spend about 8 to 10 games on average in order to either unlock a better ability or try a new weapon. Tournament matches don't help either. You earn the same average of VRs playing as many single matches as you play games in tournaments. And it sucks because it really discourages experimenting with different items or playstyles, because if it turns out what you unlock doesn't perform the way you wanted, you have to grind again to try something else. You could argue that you should be prioritizing safe unlocks and meta weapons, but this just means that any bad experiments end up as pointless grinds towards what? And it feels even worse when you don't have any meta gear to switch back to, because then you feel stuck with an inferior unlock. Grinding the battle pass or career XP isn't easy either. Even if you were to complete each daily challenge, you gain only 7,500 XP, when each tier of the battle pass takes around 9,000 to attain. There's fun movement tech like prop surfing and prop grappling that apparently has been patched out several times by the devs, which isn't only useful to have, but also fun. It gives mobility to classes that need it the most, at the cost of breaking some immersion. Never mind the fact that we are ironically in a virtual world, there's also other tech I knew was going to be nerfed, like the nuke tech. Play as Heavy, equip C4, and place both of them on either an explosive prop or a gas prop. Throw it at someone and pop the C4. In most cases, it's a good way to cheese an instant kill, and can even wipe a team if they aren't spaced enough. Light builds can do the same trick, albeit worse than Heavies, since they get a breaching charge that deals less damage, takes longer to pop, and can only deploy 1 while Heavies get 2, plus the fact that Heavy builds throw objects the furthest. Why the fuck does Heavy get the better option again? And the new balancing update has elements that doesn't make sense. They nerfed nuke meta by making the rig prop heavy as fuck, instead of swapping the C4 and breaching charges respective build access like they should, or making the prop explode when shot while it's being held. I've seen a certain idea floating around where it's been suggested that they should just remove sticking explosives to props in general, but that's a bad idea considering the fact that this was shown in the trailer. Personally, I believe they should remove these elemental props in general, and just give the ability to throw other random stuff like tables, drawers, and benches. The Mach 11 had its recoil slightly reduced, making it easier to control at range. I think we're going to see a lot more use of this weapon. The recoil reduction makes it viable as a self-defense option in close to medium ranges, though I have fears that this weapon might be a little too powerful in this state. But there is a trade-off. Compared to the MP5, it deals 9 more DPS, has more visual recoil, and uses iron sights. The MP5 fires slowly, has less damage and less recoil, but has a clear optic, making it more suitable for medium range encounters. But the new Mach 11 is capable of absolutely melting targets with point-blank headshots. This in itself is its trade-off, as you have to ADS and therefore make yourself a slower moving target in order to pull off enough of a string of headshots in order to kill a healthy target. Okay, look, I'm sorry, I know this review is already late. I thought I could grind this out in a week, but I've had to relearn OBS, and there's so much that just happened within the past week. Apparently, it's a great time to restart a gaming channel, because there's no shortage of topics right now. Anyways, 1.5.5 nerfs medium across the board by halving the invincibility time from revives, decreasing the Guardian turret health by 20, reducing the base damage of the F-car by 1, and shortening the damage fall-off range of the revolver. What this means is that you can't really defib someone in the middle of a firefight anymore, forcing you to relocate their statue first. The F-car is slightly weaker, it does less chip damage per shot, but full targets at close range will see no difference in time to kill. The revolver will start to get weaker starting from 23 meters. In my experience, is still plenty range for normal encounters. There's an interesting buff given to the China light grenade launcher for the medium. It now allows you to kill lights using a direct hit and an elbow. I know this video seems like it was filled with a lot of harsh criticism, and thanks for watching if you made it this far. But really, the Finals is a very good, unique FPS game. I believe Embark has really made something very special here, and my earlier criticisms are all just gameplay aspects that people can deal with as time goes on. But though I acknowledge the game's initial success, I have lingering skepticism for its future. For one, Embark is a subsidiary of Nexon, known as the developer of MapleStory, but they are also a publisher of other live service titles like Lawbreakers, Counter-Strike Online, and a list of other popular Western titles for certain Asian regions. If you've played some of those titles, you'll know that these games are often free to play and filled with microtransactions. Embark probably really needs that cash, but considering the entire game is themed around hyper-capitalism tropes, it gets really tiring really fast. You'll also have to remember that this is also another live service title, but then there's also the fact that this isn't even the only live service title that Embark plans to host. Arc Raiders is their other FPS title that was pushed in order to focus on releasing the finals. It's yet another PvPvE, survival extraction looter shooter that's yet to be released in a closed alpha state. Adding another live service title to Embark's workload would have probably been a really bad idea, especially considering what has released recently. The new free-for-all mode will definitely help retain the solo queue player base, but the longevity of this game really boils down to the content that Embark is able to deliver. There are only 4 maps: Skyway, Monaco, Vegas, and Seoul. Though, to me, it only really feels like 3 maps. One that's mostly indoors, one that's mostly high-rises, and one that's mostly residential buildings. Random map variants help keep the rotation feel fresh and interesting, but they aren't enough to really change the feeling of the map. More often, they are actually to the detriment of play quality, putting objectives in very powerful positions that wouldn't otherwise be there, solely due to an RNG aspect that players have no control of. Each map has at least 3 map variants, including the base map, which are usually just remove a building or have floating areas. It would be more interesting to have flipped maps where the players have to navigate high rises that have been turned upside down, or symmetrical maps where the entire arena has a random side mirroring the other. There are also arena events that try and make the match more interesting, starting near the halfway point of the game, but these arena events range from useful and interesting like mega damage to downright annoying like low gravity. The premium cosmetics available at the time of this review also isn't inspiring. There are kinda cool tropes like aliens and jabs at flat earthers and this black swan character, and then there are the season themed items like luxury golden trim gear and casino themed modifications, but the rest of the store is filled with items that are just recolors of items you unlock through gaining career XP. These premium items are recolored to better colors, but the fact stands that they are essentially just reskins of earnable content that has a premium price tag. There have been better premiums that have been released, skins that completely change the model of the item, like the baseball bat and certain Mac 11 skins, and throwbacks to Battlefield Bad Company. But the rollout of these items are few and far between, and often aren't distinct enough to stand out from the crowd. As the game stands, it has a very short sight of the future. The limited time free-for-all mode helps to retain the solo queue players, but it's also the only lone wolf oriented aspect of the game so far. Apart from quick matches, tournaments, and LTMs, there are only 2 games within the finals: Cash Out and Bank It. The 2 have very similar objectives, and it only slightly changes the team lineup meta to maybe include 1 light player. It would be nice to see a different game mode like a proper TDM, especially with the multiverses aspect, where points are scored by wiping teams, and not necessarily individual kills. On a more technical and slightly more boring note, I have to address the few settings within the game that I believe are flawed. First off, I play on PC, and by default, the game uses an upscaler to handle graphics. If you aren't aware of how upscalers work, they help alleviate the load of graphics-intensive scenes by internally rendering frames at lower sizes, then literally zooms and enhances to get similar visual clarity to native resolutions. For me, it defaulted to using FSR2, since I don't have an RTX card to use NVIDIA DLSS. The problem with upscaling is that it introduces image instability whenever scenes get hectic, which is a big problem considering that default weapons use iron sights. It is very difficult to keep track of the irons, especially when most of the game's iron sights are basically just floating posts, and that player silhouettes actually begin to disappear as you deliver sustained fire to a target. A quick and easy fix for this would just be to add tritium to every weapon that uses iron sights. It naturally draws your eye to the point of impact, and it's practically impossible to lose track of where you're aiming. The other thing about the gun sights is that apparently there's a problem with reticles being out of alignment with the actual point of impact during certain actions. In my opinion, this is unacceptable considering that there is already a significant amount of visual recoil, as well as unique recoil patterns for every ballistic weapon. Where the reticle lines up should be where the bullet lands, simple as. There's no excuse for this not to be the case, as remember, we are ironically in a virtual world. Going back to upscaling, I use TAAU at 100% render scale in order to combat a CPU bottleneck in my system. If you use TAAU, I also suggest turning up the anti-aliasing option, since TAA methods naturally make the final image appear blurry to most people. In fact, there seems to be increased ghosting in some scenes with TAAU as the selected rendering option, which also doesn't aid shooting with iron sights. Moving on from visuals, the game has a really convoluted control scheme, and that's also from a guy who plays Tarkov. Why does interact have to be a different action than pick up object? Why do we have to have different toggle and hold to crouch binds by default? There's an emote wheel bind and then there's a gesture wheel bind that you can just cycle through either when you bring them up, and the ping button has a wheel that really shouldn't be there. You have to hold the button to bring it up, but that just makes accidental calls more likely to happen, especially when playing with high DPI. There's also the ability to reload your weapon while ADS, and the ability to fire shots without cycling the action on certain weapons that have next to no use in a game like the finals. You might argue that it helps track targets from far away since you have some level of zoom while ADS, but it also makes you a slower moving target, and it doesn't help you determine if your reload action is completed. Also, not cycling the action doesn't help. You can see through the scope just fine while cycling the bolt, unlike Tarkov. And it certainly doesn't help any with a lever action shotgun. Instead of being able to reload while ADS, they should just add reload canceling across all weapons. It would help keep the pace of gameplay by being able to top off at any time with relatively little risk, and only being able to ADS with a full mag ensures that whenever you do ADS, your weapon is ready to fire. I've also been getting this issue with some bizarre lag. I can almost describe it as output lag that happens during certain actions. There also seems to be some input lag as well, but then there's this disconnect that happens between a registered shot and actual damage that results from said shot. There's also some strange phantom interactions resulting from inputs during animations. You'll notice I'm doing this in practice mode, but it might not actually matter, because practice mode for some ungodly reason has to be server client. You can wait up to 30 seconds to a full minute or more just to find a server for solo practice. This strange server client connection might also extend beyond the game to the main menu interface. When I started playing, I had a strange bug where I couldn't queue for a game after going in and out of the pause menu after comparing settings. When I was playing during the Winter Drops event on Twitch, I also experienced long wait times for the game to register my equipment unlocks. A game like Siege also has server client unlocks, but at least solo play is hosted locally. You'll also notice that solo practice has a 30-minute timer. Here's what happens when you run it down. I think it might be better for new players if they were to start with, say, 1500 VRs instead of starting with nothing, with the equipment store being locked until they finish their first game or two. This way, new players would be able to experiment with more equipment at the start of their experience, without having to grind to unlock something they feel would help, or feeling like they are forced into a bad unlock experience. The amount of VRs would also be enough to unlock a weapon, and immediately after one game, they'd be able to unlock a different one if they feel like it was a bad choice. Or, alternatively, they can immediately spend 1000 VRs on a high tier item if they feel like they need it. For light build specializations, I feel like Evasive Dash is kinda mid for what it's worth, but the grappling hook definitely needs an upgrade. Something like more charges or the ability to hook people away, I feel like would be a very well received upgrade. The C4 and breaching charge should swap classes, but otherwise, classes are generally very well balanced. The mesh shield nerf was a little weirdo, but it's whatever. Iron sights should be improved. Either add tritium or reduce the jitter, and make it so every reticle more accurately reflects the true point of impact. The throwing knives are one of the most fun weapons to me, but I think that the weapon could be improved by adding an extra knife to throw, having the primary fire trajectory flatter, or the velocity improved. You can also do away with the alt fire in this case, and replace it with something like a shorter range, wide angle attack for extremely close combat, multiple target scenarios. Finally, the shooting range should be hosted locally. I have no idea why it's server-based. Though I remain skeptical of the final's future, I am interested to see where this game goes in 6 and 12 months. This game has real potential to stand on its own in a market full of live service FPS games. I'm curious to see how they'll handle real-life tournaments, since this game already has a tournament-style matching system, and how they'll handle custom team names. I feel like the name The Finals doesn't help either. It's a really stupid name considering that people are going to make actual tournaments. Welcome to ESL Pro League Finals of the Finals, head ass. A more suitable name would have been something like the leaderboards, or considering the casino theme, the top.
Hey, baby doll. Welcome to the Top's Hotel and Casino.
Also, can we please get rid of this solid red background? I'm really starting to get tired of seeing the color red. Like I've said before, the potential for this game's continued success depends on Embark's ability to deliver fresh, quality content that can keep players engaged and returning again and again. And that concludes my review of the finals. What do you think of this game? Do you think the classes are unbalanced? Do you think the title could be better? Do you also hate the goddamn throwing knives? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to share this video with other people in the finals community. I'd really like to get the chance to throw some of my thoughts out there, and I'd like to know some of yours. Until then, I'm the one, the only, the game killer. And I guess I'm stuck here now.